This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And we are finally at it, man. Totally into the final week of NBA basketball. And that means we'll have play-in time, plenty of time for us to weigh in on all these things. But another awesome episode to be rolled out for you regarding the Autopsy Report series. You know, we love doing it. So I'd be remiss if I wasn't able to get it down, to get in on it with my lab partner in crime. You know, my man, 50 grand, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw. What's good, my man? How are you living? And I got to ask this question once we do our salutations.
Always good to be here with you, my guy. And autopsy time, but also inching close to the second year of the Baseline Awards as the season comes to a close. So
yes, indeed,
look out for that. It was quite a lot of fun we had last year, and definitely looking forward to bringing that back too. But right now we got to body them up, bag them, zip them. Let's get it popping.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. So I got a quick question for you. Do you think, and I know this is what's kind of, the reading the temperature in the room here with regards to the MVP chase, but do you think Joel Embiid's performance on our Boston Celtics cemented his comeuppance of finally getting that award? Or did you think he had already bagged it prior to that? I'm really curious of what your perspective would be on this.
I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm not one of those people who are now like, I'm swayed by the last week of the season. Like all of a sudden you can win the award in the last week. Like just like you couldn't win it in the first 10 games or first month of the season, you can't win it in the last week per se. It has to be the total body of work. But a lot of people are in that mode, and it's kind of like, what have you done for me lately? And how you finish is really, it's kind of the determining factor of who wins the award. I think that's just an interesting situation. The Nuggets are already, they've pretty much clinched the Western Conference, top seed and whatever. While Embiid was my preseason pick, I thought Jokic was the guy, was the pick, maybe midway through and even into, parts of February. I think Embiid has come on, but I wouldn't say the last game or this last week is what's made the difference. I think it's still the total body of work. So I can't be swayed that easily.
I agree with you. I just was really curious on where you were with it, because I've been seeing how people have been looking at the season in so many different parts, but have never been able to package or put together the full story. You know what I'm saying? So it could be read chapter to verse, right? And so for me personally, I think Joel Embiid is going to wind up winning this, but I think it's going to be for all of the reasons that doesn't really get spoken to. Like, if you really think about the way that the Denver Nuggets have been playing, regardless of the numbers that Jokic has been putting on, I don't know if the numbers have been having as much of an impact, as much as I just feel like he's as equally lost as all of his other teammates are. Now, then maybe they'll figure things out when the time comes for the playoffs and everything. But I just feel like you see more of a presence from Joel Embiid during these final stretch of games, where because of what the 76ers have been doing, they had inserted themselves to be among one of the top 3 teams, right? Like they were trying to chase down the Milwaukee Bucks. They had almost flagged down the Boston Celtics. And so where we were talking about this being a 2-team race in the Eastern Conference, the Philadelphia 76ers have kind of changed that dynamic, that the dimension of talk, so to speak. And a lot of that is because of Joel Embiid, because again, James Harden is not 100%. And again, we're still questioning, can these two, when fully healthy, be among the best tandems that know how to get it done when it comes to crunch time? And the one thing I will say about this, and that I'm hoping is what takes place, especially when we're talking about the Nuggets and the Sixers, I want all of their top tier players to be in peak condition for this playoff run. I don't think we can have as much joy watching this upcoming playoffs, and we'll get into our previews and everything like that when on the road. I get that, but we can't enjoy this unless these guys are at 100% ready to go to make this playoff push, because I don't know how many windows of opportunity we can have with this many players and this many stars inserted into the conversation for us to make a decision on who actually is going to be representing the East and Western Finals. I know we do this in other years, and we've said this before, but I truly want to believe in the idea that Embiid, Harden, healthy, Murray, Porter, Jokic, healthy, means a damn good playoff competitive NBA playoff competitive series for 2023 season.
Yeah, we all want to see that. Who's nobody's rooting against that for sure. And just keeping it to the earlier part, the MVP is obviously a regular season award, but people want to then obviously think about, okay, well, what does the playoff success mean? The Denver Nuggets have had better playoff success in their history than Joel Embiid has with the Sixers. Obviously, the Nuggets made it to a Western Conference final. The Sixers have not. So health has played a role, I think, in both of those outcomes. Especially when the Nuggets were healthy, Jamal Murray was arguably the playoff MVP, for them in that bubble run, so to speak. But at the end of the day, these are two teams that are poised to make very, very deep runs in the respective conferences. Two great players, and a lot of people would still take Jokic over Embiid in terms of if you're building a franchise, starting that today. But the overall body of work, I think, for the MVP is a narrative conversation that we all know and love, which we'll have obviously in more detail on the award show.
Absolutely. All right. So now that we're talking about all the winning, let's go ahead and figure out a couple of teams who have defined the art of losing.
That's cold, bro. That's cold.
But it's uncommon for like a team like the Portland Trailblazers, right? It's uncommon for them because they've actually been a successful basketball team the last few seasons. And maybe minus a few injuries, who knows how successful this team would have been, right? But when you already have packed it in and told your superstar, go home and start dropping some more hot 16s, you know what I'm saying? You already start working on your videos for the Grammys, you know what I'm saying, for next year. Pretty much is telling you that basketball isn't a priority for the remainder of this NBA season. So with that being said, Shaw and I are going to make sure we dig in on the Portland Trail Blazers and the Washington Wizards. Two teams who have very interesting scenarios with their superstar players and what their executives are going to need to do. So you don't want to miss out on that as we continue our Autopsy series. As always, be sure to get my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at Game Face Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. If you want to check out this episode and our previous episodes, go to www.thebaselinenba.com. Also recognize the Baseline runs with the 19 Media Group. For those of you watching us on YouTube, what up, what up? If you see the blue logo down there, you know that's the 19 Media Group. We rocks with them. That's family. So we encourage you to not only catch us, but catch the plethora of great talent and content via the 19 Media Group. Go to www.19mediagroup.com. All right. So with that being said, you know how we do. You know how we roll. Give us a couple minutes here. Going to throw on them white coats so we can examine and zoom a couple of bodies in our latest edition of the Autopsy series. You don't want to miss out here on the Baseline.
Time to break it down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Lee Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and this is our Autopsy Report series. Shaw and I throwing on them white coats, and we get to body up a couple of more teams on the slab. And the first team we're going to talk about is the Portland Trailblazers. The Portland Trailblazers, a team that, pretty much have packed it in on the early side of things. They're among third, fourth worst in the Western Conference. And listen, I know that the focal point has always been about them shutting down Dame Lillard earlier. It's ironic because Dame Lillard is the consummate professional. He's also the type of basketball player that doesn't want the perception out there that just because his team isn't winning means that he doesn't want to be out on the basketball court competing. But I will say this much, Shaw. This is a very interesting time for the Portland Trailblazers. Because while we knew that there was going to probably be a fire sale taking place with their star athletes, they still somehow managed to keep Damian Lillard. They still kept, Yusuf Nurkic. the future for Anthony Simons is great. But I'm sure that there are certain question marks that even you may have for them. I'm just wondering, Shaw, that when you think about this basketball team and you think about, what defines winning for them, how much are they salvaging the loyalty or basing this on the loyalty of Damian Lillard and not what really should be the proper and the right decisions made to rebuild this team and accelerate their rebuilding process, so to speak.
Yeah, they're holding on to tales of yesteryear. It's been a rough go, obviously, for this team this year. They're not good offensively, not good defensively, not good in pace. Don't shoot the three ball well, even with Dame having a career year scoring wise. Billups has just really kind of struggled, to kind of get an identity in place. And I take that back. They were 12th in 3-point percentage this year, so not terrible. But it's just been something that understanding and holding on to Dame at this point is now doing more harm than it can possibly do good because of how much salary he eats up with the cap. He's going to be making $63 million at the end of his contract. $63 million.
And listen,
for one
he's
player.
every penny of it. When you look at just how phenomenal a player he is. It's funny, a few years ago, Shaw, we've had like some really great guests on to talk about the Portland Trailblazers. And some of them, I think really were hard on Damian Lillard. I think that the perception regarding Damian Lillard was, he's such a ball hog. The ball just seems to stick to him. It's a mistake that, you can't run it with him and McCollum. They're two alphas. And then you kind of look at the body of work and, listen, Damian Lillard really has been a phenomenal player for the Portland Trailblazers. You know what I'm saying? Like, not just putting up the numbers, but, the teams that he's played for prior to this year have been phenomenally good basketball teams, which is really a stark contrast conversation that we're having about what has taken place this year. And I don't know if you're putting, if obviously the idea, or is that we should put that on his legacy of, what is taking place. But it is something that has to be addressed because of what you just alluded to. That much money invested in one player, and to have the results that you're looking at with this team this past season, it's definitely it's tenable. It's not tenable at all for them to continue this.
Yeah, when I say, and that'll be at the end of his. So the end of his contract is 4 years away, but he'll be like 36, 37 years old, making $63 million. And usually that hasn't worked out for too many good teams. Yeah, with a player at that age. But at the end of the day, in the short term, where we're at, is like I said, they need to figure out a way to save Dame from himself. There's an incredible conversation going on in NBA Twitter right now where Dame does not want to leave Portland. He wants to win in Portland. Then criticizes, or maybe not criticizes, but make comments like, hey, well, I'm not here for the rebuild. Well, the way the team is structured right now, they can't move forward, I think, with him in a way that is logical. So it almost makes him look illogical in some of his conversations. I'm not here. I'm not trying to think about next year and da-da-da-da. But you need to kind of release Portland or let Portland let you go. And I don't know if that's a, media savvy thing where it's like, hey, well, I said I tried to stay and, they moved me. Either way, I think the marriage has to be done. But I don't want to spend too much time here because it's almost a tired conversation at this point. Everyone is saying Dame should be traded. Dame doesn't want to go. So what are we doing? Until the Portland Trailblazers in the front office decide like this is the route the direction that we want to take. And sure, we're hearing the reports now. All right, now this is year, they're really going to at least think about it and consider it over the course of the offseason. I just believe it when I see it. So for now, I think you focus on the players that are here, the players whose contracts are up. You just mentioned Anthony Simons. He got a 4-year deal, right? So he's locked in for the rest of the, for the next foreseeable future. But Jeremy Grant, who they brought over in a trade last year, had a good season for them, was injured a lot, but still averaged 20 a game. Nurkic, who I know is not a fan favorite of yours, he signed up, locked up for another 3 years after this season as well. Shaedon Sharpe. Hold on. Let me get through. I know you want to get on Nurkic, but Shaedon Sharpe, rookie, playing really great basketball to close the year. The more interesting moves, though, I think, are what are they going to do with the contracts of Cam Reddish and Matisse Thybulle? Now, I don't think those are building blocks to your team, but those are pieces now who you traded for. And you're not going to just, I would assume you're not going to let them just walk away. Their little has developed and showed a little bit of something here and there. But this team needs to figure out what the identity is, I guess, around Dame, long-term and short-term.
Yeah. So a lot of question marks. And I think part of it too, is that you look at the roster and you have a lot of guys that have a lot to prove. And my question is that if they can't prove it with Portland, where can they prove it? It's amazing to me because a few years ago, like when you bring up Matisse Thybulle, a few years ago, Matisse Thybulle was like, there was a future for this kid, right? Like he had a place where he could literally be like a staunch defender, opportunity for him to improve his perimeter shooting. But he's a big athletic guard. And even to this day, we still need those, right? At least when I checked. It's amazing how he's not usable for a team like the Portland Trail Blazers, or he's not been able to find his footing with this team. The one thing that I will say, and I don't want to harken too much on Nurkic, because I've said for a very long time that the reason why you try to move Nurkic early is because heaven forbid he comes out and he does so well that he puts you in a bind where you may feel like you have to commit to him only because of the fact that you were tied to Damian Lillard, right? I mean, it's weird that the Trailblazers are in this space, because you can't keep you can't even keep Nurkic if you wanted to. I think, he's worn out his welcome for the Portland Trailblazers. And I think you have to completely move on from the idea that, to your point, you want to hold on yesteryear. He was a part of yesteryear. He was a part of that experimentation of trying to put together their version of a big three. And it just hasn't worked out. Doesn't mean that Nurkic can't still be a serviceable big and can produce for like another team. But it's impossible to think that you're going to try to build Nurkic and Simons. That's not going to work at all. So they definitely have to move both Lillard, both Nurkic. Jeremy Grant, I don't know. I mean, it would be nice to see some stability, and I think he's had his best years playing as a Portland Trailblazer. So that could very well be a good placeholder while you figure out what you want to do.
So would you rather pay Jeremy Grant on this kind of not even middling team, this struggling to get in play-in team, or just let Shaedon Sharpe develop and, let Jeremy Grant ride off into the sunset, because he's going to be looking for $25 to $27 million per, in his next deal. He's 28 years old. So, he's got 1-2-ish, maybe more paydays. And he's going to look to try to cash in here. So
let me ask you this question. Where do you have the versatility for Shaedon Sharpe? Or do you just see him basically just strictly taking over or playing Jeremy Grant's role?
It's not a 1-for-1, swap. I'm just saying, I think kind of in general, if you're looking at the spot itself, and Grant is obviously more of a 3-4, and Sharpe is more of a 2-3. I think at this stage. But if I'm looking to build, and you have Simons or whatever the case may be, listen, this team isn't. I don't think this team is going anywhere as currently constructed, and that's what I'm saying. So if Grant, you get the opt out of Grant because his contract is it completely expires. You flubbed up and gave Nurkic an extension last year, which you probably shouldn't have done. He's got 3 more years, as I alluded to. I don't think you double down or triple down, if you will, on this roster by saying, all right, well, let's keep Grant in here for X amount of years, unless you can get it to some sort of team-friendly deal. And I'm not saying in terms of money, but in terms of years or options. And that way, then maybe you can keep him, and then obviously you keep the asset, retain the asset, and he becomes flippable, especially if, it's a deal that, allows the team to have some level of control. But I don't know why Grant would agree to that. So to me, Sharpe is the better bet to kind of weigh on and truly bottom out. And maybe it takes another year of struggling, and Dame is like, all right, finally, let me get out of here. I'm not into playing games, but I don't know if Portland has another choice here other than to kind of play games with Dame here. And it sounds really jacked up, so I feel bad even saying it. But listen, we're not good, and you know what? We're going to show you that we're not good.
You went from the real mild manner, you know what I'm saying, real, Easy Me to Dexter. I mean, you plotting to kill a dude's legacy, right?
No, I mean, and I think, well, and I think that's harsh. His legacy is his legacy in Portland is forever. There's no doubt about that. He's the greatest trailblazer to ever lace him up. There's no two ways about that. But it's almost like a game of chicken. Put all the memes you want to put out there. Like Dame's looking at them, they're looking at Dame, and at this point, there needs to be a separation. But nobody wants to budge. They just kind of want to continue on in this kind of unhappy and not great marriage. And somebody should give. But if you don't, and it's like, and if you in the court of public perception per se, is like, all right, well, the Blazers may just want to say, listen, we'll keep the team kind of as is, where it's just like, and then Dame ultimately is like, you know what, maybe I need to get up out of here.
I mean, look, I don't disagree with you. I think that this is part of the priority that Cronin is going to have to really weigh but I will say this, he cannot mess with this, right? He can't wait this thing out. I think this has to be a very decisive and judicious, immediate, play. You dance around with this, you let this linger, and then you run the risk of the guys that you do have them questioning where they fit in and where they stand. But let me circle back onto one other particular point that you made, because I think to me it sounded like you were really disappointed in Chauncey Billups and what he's done as a coach, at least this past season. So I'm just curious for you, how long of a leash are you willing to give Chauncey Billups? Because another part of this equation as well too is recognizing that if you're Chauncey Billups and you have to work with a rebuild process, are you willing to do that because you no longer have a Damian Lillard, a star player to work with? You have a potentially promising star in Anthony Simons, but we've seen where he has his ebb and flows. If you're Chauncey Billups, how much patience can you exhibit in that?
I mean, if I'm Chauncey, this is not what I signed up for. I didn't sign up here to rebuild. So he came there because Dame was there specifically. And if for some reason Dame were not to be there, then, you'd have to reevaluate that situation. Maybe he would stay. But if you're looking at a team of Simons and Sharp and Cam Reddish and Nurkic, like, what it is. like you know what that is. So to me, it's really kind of, shit or get off the pot time, I think, for the entirety of the Blazers organization, from Dame to Cronin to Billups, everybody taking a hard look in the mirror. But again, like I said, I don't want to continue to beat this horse because it is the elephant in the room that we can't really get around of, but we keep hearing the same thing. So it really now results to the rest of the roster. And I think if they find a taker for Nurkic, they don't re-sign Grant. Obviously they moved off of Josh Hart here in the middle of the season. Do you bring back, like I said, if you bring back Reddish and Thibault and guys like that, that to me might say kind of where the team is going. But it's not really great, I think, in Portland right now. And it sucks because you have a Hall of Fame talent, on the roster who's, again, is the greatest player to ever play for your organization.
All right, Shaw. Well, was that your eulogy? It felt like it. Were you killing them softly? I think.
I mean, I'm killing them really, right? And and just being as honest as I possibly can. I think we both have a certain level of affinity for this Blazers organization. We have a certain level of affinity for Lillard himself. I mean, I even like Anthony Simons. I mean, he's still 23 and he's got a lot of growing to do. As a guard and as a guy who can try to score it, but also combo guard who can sometimes create for others as well. But this roster just isn't it. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, as we record this podcast, I mean, the Trailblazers are running out Drew Eubanks, Kevin Knox, Mays, Sharp, and Williams. So that's a eulogy in of itself. Yeah. Oh my God. Listen, I hope that things do turn around for the Portland Trailblazers, but yeah, this is shaking time.
Let me say this last thing.
Okay.
$112 million in committed salary next year. That's without Grant That's without Reddish. So that's without Thibault. That's out without even Winslow. They already have $112 million in committed salary without some of the key-ish guys and guys who they just traded for or traded for within the last year or so. So what are they doing? I don't know. I just don't get it.
I mean, easy, man. Put the knife down. Don't.
All right, I'm done.
All right. I don't know what you're doing with that scalpel, man. Get down. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Ward-Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, hopefully my man has a much more feathery touch with the Washington Wizards than he has right now with the Portland Trailblazers. But man, we don't know. He went from Quincy to Dexter real quick. We'll try to settle him back down.
People don't know nothing about no damn Quincy.
I'm old school. What can I tell you?
Jesus.
Oh, man. We'll try to get Shaw back. You know what I'm saying? We'll get our Shaw, the ME Shaw, back on track here on the Baseline. We are back. Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, and this is the Autopsy Report, and we're going to go ahead and keep it moving. The next team that we'll be talking about is the Washington Wizards, and Washington Wizards have had a very interesting season. They came out the gate like gangbusters, right? Like they were hanging with the teams in the Eastern Conference. There was really a lot of promise regarding the combination of Bradley Beal and Kristaps Porzingis. And maybe one could even argue that even when Bradley Beal went down again, that it really opened up the door for Kristaps Porzingis to really kind of find himself and come into his own. Part of where a lot of our concern has always been with Kristaps is that it's just not sustainable with him and he just can't stay healthy. And we don't know whether the interest level is there to be a great player. There's definitely promise there for him to be a solid player. Being a great player, that's going to require consistency. But when you look at this team, Shaw, when you look at this Washington Wizards team, we just finished having our conversation about the Portland Trailblazers. And I don't know if you're going to find a better combination. I don't know if you did this on purpose, like you intended, to cut up both of these teams at the same time. But you have to start questioning the same thing that we did for Damian Lillard with Bradley Beal. And, should I stay or should I go, type thing. And if obviously I don't want to leave, when does the organization say, hey, man, we love you for what you've done, but we need you to kick rocks so we can get into this full, rebuild mode that we should have done. We should have moved you. How many times has it been now when it comes to Bradley Beal? Like 5, 6, 7, 8, 20 times. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, to your point, what are we doing here?
We're securing the bag. I mean, we've said that a lot about Beal and to a lesser degree Lillard. Like they've wanted their money and they've gotten their money. They're able to stay with their organizations now. Anything could potentially happen. I believe it was on this show where we might have had a conversation. It's like, listen, one of these two guys should form like Voltron and like ask to go probably play with the other. A Lillard and Beal combination would be one of the better backcourts, in the NBA for sure. I don't think we're going to get that, at any stage of the agenda here.
That combination would be the combination that we were hoping to see between Luka and Kyrie Irving.
Yeah. I mean, like offensively. And I think even the playmaking capabilities, a little less than obviously Luka's one of the better creators in our game, but it would definitely be up there, right? And I think where Washington currently lands is, are they now going to middle themselves to death? Listen, I've loved the season Kristaps Porzingis has had. He's had a complete bounce back season, played 65 games. Beal's only played 50 games. That guy just really can't stay on the floor. But now you're hearing the Wizards talk about extension for Porzingis. And I don't disagree in terms of that it's being warranted, but I think a lot of people are saying, it's like, all right, well, where does that leave you? Just because he had a good season, are you the team that should pay him, given the results that you had even alongside Beal? Like, it left you out of even the play-in game here yet again. And Kyle Kuzma is also up for a contract extension. What do you do with that? So let me just again run some numbers for you, Mr. Cowley. Okay.
Do I need a pen and paper?
Both Porzingis and Kuzma have player options. They're opting out. They're opting out. I mean, Porzingis, maybe he opts in, but not likely. So with those options, they already are at $148 million next year. For a team that didn't make the play-in tournament.
That's reasonably priced, right?
That's worse than Portland.
So, of course it is.
And again, that's with the player option. So if you extrapolate that, assume Kuzma's definitely opting out. There's not a chance he's coming back at $13 million. Not a chance. Porzingis, you could say maybe at 36, does he just say, listen, you know what, I'll play it out again? I doubt it. He probably is looking for a 2 or 3 year extension. Does he make it team friendly or not? Either way, you're going to be well over the cap with those 3 guys. And again, this is a team that didn't make the play-in. So I'm struggling to see how the Wizards are going to be viable, other than just like, hey, a fun story. They get hot for a little while, score a bunch of points, and then ultimately the offense and the defense continues to fail them. Daniel Gafford seems like a serviceable big, can obviously more than a rotation player, can definitely give you some blocks and some rebounds here and there. But everything else around this team is still kind of just like, I like, Corey Crispert is reasonably decent shooter. Monty Morris didn't have the season we were expecting him to have, at least not the season I expected him to have. Abdia played well when he got his minutes sometimes here and there. But again, it's just middling. And I think all of these teams are looking and striving and should be striving for more than that, getting into the playoffs and then trying to build from there. But I don't know if a combination of Beal, Porzingis, and Kuzma, as good as it is offensively, all 3 of those guys are over 20 points per game this year. What does it lend to? You couldn't even get past the Hawks. And that to me is problematic.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with where you're coming from. Let me throw something out at you, Shaw, because I'm curious what your take is. You look over out in the West Coast, and Austin Reeves is like kind of coming into his own, right? Like he's becoming a star for the Los Angeles Lakers, which is not easy, right? Kyle Kuzma had he had an opportunity, and really the opportunity that was given to him with the Los Angeles Lakers, I think because of consistency, it made it very difficult for the Lakers to figure out a way to keep him when, he wound up basically being expendable for something better than him, right? When you look at the rest of this Washington Wizards team with all of these players, Kispert, Goodwin, Gafford, Davis, Gill, all of these guys, right? Of Deja. Do you find them to be any better than Austin Reeves?
What kind of question is that?
Well, no, the reason why I'm asking that question, Shaw, is because if you're the Washington Wizards, and for a moment, let's forget Bradley Beal. Okay, I know it's hard to, but just for a moment, forget Bradley Beal. Let's just say the focal point is Porzingis and his extension. If you choose to bring Porzingis, are you running back with the same roster of guys that you have? Like, of these guys that you've had, Gafford's been here for a while. Kispert, he's been around for a little bit now. Avdija, relatively young. But of those guys, do you find that is there any promise that's coming out of them that they're gonna find a place to have an impact for a team like the Washington Wizards? That you're gonna start saying, I want to build around, Porzingis with these type of guys. Some guys figure it out very quickly. It feels like, and I'm just saying, it feels like a guy like Austin Reeves has figured it out. Where if this is the run that the Lakers are going to make, they're going to have to make it with this guy, Austin Reeves, playing at the level that he's playing. The Washington Wizards have had these players for quite some time now. And it just doesn't feel like we're talking about any of these guys with upside potential. You just mentioned it. You just described them. They're relatively good. But how long can you continue to do that, especially now that you have to start talking about putting mad dollars into the pocket of a guy like Porzingis? Or you have to maybe consider reconstructing a contract that you've given for Bradley Beal. Are you doing it at the expense of saying we're going to get rid of these guys and actually go through free agency and see if we could put some veteran solid pieces, better pieces around? Or are you buying into the idea that these younger guys are going to be able to step up and actually, shine a light on what's going on, right? Be another version of the Kyle Kuzma that the Washington Wizards were banking on him becoming for that team.
Well, I think a lot of it is so Kuzma is only at $13 million. So again, he's going to opt out. The question you then have to ask yourself is, he's been playing above his contract, right? But then is he the guy you want to tie a bunch of money into? So now he's got to get 25 to 20, somewhere 20 to $25 million. Bless you.
Thank you.
Somewhere in that range. Now, do you tie that up, understanding that he's 27 and he's probably at this point, he is who he is? There's not another level of growth for him offensively. Maybe he could get a little bit better defensively, but this is the player that you're tied to, this version of him. And I think similarly with Porzingis, sure, if you can get, he plays 65 games. If you can get to 70, 72 games with Porzingis, even better. And at least he's defending for you at times as well, too. That's, I think, the question that Washington is kind of stuck with both of them. It's just like, all right, well, you don't see the next level of upside for them. And then you're going to tie this money into both of those guys around Bill, who also is kind of who he is at this point. So that's where I say, you get stuck in the middle and ground. And sure, could you try to go attract another, young free agent, so to speak? But Washington isn't a free agent destination. And with the money that's tied up with these guys currently, they can't sign anybody outright. They would have to do some sort of trade and figuring that out. So, could you move Abdia and Kispert, and those guys don't make enough money because they're still on the rookie scale. So you could try. It's just very, very complicated, I think, for them right now. And that's where you get frustrated because you have whatever talent on you have, and it's intoxicating because, hey, well, these guys are 20 point per game guys, but they're not championship level guys, at least not with the other roster pieces that are around them. And that's what puts you in a hole, so to speak. So I get why some people would be down on giving Porzingis an extension. I get why even giving Kyle Kuzma the raise he ultimately does deserve, because it doesn't lend you and put you in a place that puts you in the upper echelon conversation in the Eastern Conference.
Agreed. But then part of that is also recognizing too that, do you want to finally concede to the idea that this should be Porzingis' team? This should be Kuzma's team. I guess part of me, Shaw, is recognizing that Bradley Beal, as great as a player is, Bradley Beal is not moving the needle on elevating the Washington Wizards beyond what you're getting right now from the Washington Wizards. Because the years of where Bradley Beal was that guy was when he was playing next to John Wall. I mean, you can make the argument that Bradley Beal is beneficial to Kristaps Porzingis, but if the team is identified by what Kristaps Porzingis does or Kyle Kuzma does, then what I'm just saying is no matter what money you're putting into whether it be one of or both of those guys, it has to be with the understanding that this is their team, which means you can't have Bradley Beal on this roster any longer. But then when you do that, what are you putting around the identity of one or both of those players moving forward? Because this is no longer like the Washington Wizards, and you just brought this up. They're no longer in a space, Shaw, where people are okay watching this team just kind of fumble through the Eastern Conference. They're not in a market where they can afford to just say, we have some dynamically, unique players, with the way Kyle Kuzma, be a fashion icon, and Kristaps Porzingis being the international unicorn. All that stuff doesn't play, man. At some point, especially in the DC area, you got to win. And you have an opportunity, a window to be able to do that in one of the weakest divisions in the NBA. But you can't because your roster is not constructed with the mindset of going out to really compete and win like that. And so that's where, to your point, Shaw, is where that interesting mentality of how this needs to be approached is really jumping out, where you give this money to these guys. It's not to say that they're not deserving of it, and it's not that you don't want them to have it, but you have to do it knowing that you are building around these two guys. And this is no longer, you got to move Bradley Beal. You've got to move also other players that you got to, find a way to say to yourself that the guys that you're surrounding Kuzma and Porzingis, there is potential upside to help improve and more so supplement what you may not get on a consistent basis because of health reasons, that these guys are going to be out there the full 82 for the season. And I don't know how you juggle that. What I'm saying is there's very little room of that transition to seeing improvement happen. It's almost like no matter what they do, if they don't do it right, they can completely crash this team for 5 years or more, simply because of what they're not doing in addressing these players.
Yeah, well, I think maybe we even need some of the advanced stats, because maybe some Wizards fans, and hopefully you're listening and tuning in, can give us some statistics. What's the record when Beal, Porzingis, and Kuzma play? Instead of they've been staggered a lot over the course of this year because of all the injuries, and I think that's what is troubling when you have to invest so much money in guys who traditionally miss a lot of time. And that's just really hard to build that level of continuity. And Wes Unseld Jr. on the sidelines is just like, well, what do you expect me to do? They need a point guard. I don't think they'll be able to address that, I think, through free agency. So they should have a lottery pick, obviously. Maybe they go that route and get somebody who they can kind of groom. But chances are that player is going to take some time to develop. And can you make that happen? I think with 1, 2, or all 3 of those guys, within the next, not even the next year, but probably the year after that, before you start to see some real yield and tread on that tires, that makes some sense for the Wizards' ultimate direction. I'm not trying to, be doom and gloom. There's value in having 20-point per game guys on your team. There's value in Porzingis and what he does, even on the defensive side. Daniel Gafford, as I mentioned as well, too. Dia, again, I'm just kind of rehashing it, but they're capable players, but they're not playoff contenders, not let alone a championship contenders, not even playoff contenders right now. And I think that's problematic ultimately. And if you get lucky and get a season where they all play 65 plus, then maybe this conversation is different. But to me, we haven't seen it yet, and I don't think you can count on that in any capacity.
All right, so let me go ahead, Shaw, and give you I'll give you an advanced statistic. You ready?
I'm ready.
The Washington Wizards this year have implemented 26 different starting lineups. Okay. Of the 26 lineups, only 2 starting lineups have played double-digit amounts of games. All right. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. The first lineup, which is Avdija, Beal, Kuzma, Morris, Porzingis, played 13 games. They were 5-8. The second lineup, Beal, Gafford, Kuzma, Morris, Porzingis, played 12 games. They were 6-6. Okay, so what I'm saying here, Shaw, is that even if you want to entertain the idea of Kuzma, Beal, and Porzingis as being your foundational pieces, of the 82 games, even with those 3, as part of your starting roster, it has only amounted to 25 games played, right, of the 82. And even at best, they are below 500 basketball team.
No, that's frightening.
And,
so I think
I'm not trying to say that, oh my God, like, this is a dumpster fire. All I'm saying, Shaw, is if you're resting your hopes on investing the kind of money that you'd like to invest in, say, Kuzma and Porzingis, you have to go in with the expectation of thinking that you need a significantly better roster to be able to compete than what you already are having, even if you've got Bradley Beal with them. And I don't know how you're able to achieve that with the money invested already in Beal and with what you already have surrounding the other 2 guys on your roster. That's tough.
It's tough. So if I heard you right, so would the Avdija lineup better, or was the Gafford lineup better?
The Gafford lineup is better.
Oh, that makes sense because of the defense. But then you lose some spacing out there. But again, if Kuzma can be 36 to 38% 3-point shooter alongside Beal, and that's why I think the point guard position becomes so important for them as well. Somebody who can really help distribute and get the ball out there, because Beal is I don't even want to go there, but Beal has some playmaking chops, but he's not somebody who you want to have that level of responsibility kind of throughout. And he did it a couple of years ago, and I think that was the year he was average 30, and I think he was at like 6 or 7 assists a game as well too, because like his usage rate was just bananas at that point. But he can't sustain that. He definitely can't sustain it in a winning environment. So to me, that's probably their biggest need. Go out there and get a point guard, then figure out as well what's going on, obviously, with Kuzma and Porzingis, because I don't think they're going to be able to move Beal. And I think at some point, it depends on the circles that you're in, but there are some out there that feel Beal's contract is a little toxic. It's just like he's not the guy. He's a little Paul George's without the defense. Right? It's like he puts up the good numbers and understands that he's not a number one, and you can't build a winning team around him. And it's not a knock. I think you hear that statement, it's like you feel like it's so negative. It's just not a knock. Certain guys are just what they are. Like I couldn't be the president of the United States. Doesn't mean I'm a bad employee. I mean, certain things are just not my job, not within my purview to do. So I think Beal.
It's the argument that I often make, Shaw, where people think that if I'm ragging a particular coach, it's not that I don't think that he's a good head coach. I just think that he's better as an assistant head coach. And I think part of that is because there are certain attributes that you need to have to be an effective head coach that some assistant head coaches that so badly want to be a head coach, they don't have it. It doesn't resonate. It may not be the right time, or they're just not good at that. That doesn't mean that they are not legendary, among one of the best. And sometimes we have to recognize that, right? There are just some things that we're just not naturally that good at. And we could be given numerous opportunities to go out there and try and prove it. But at some point, the same ego that's driving you to say that you deserve to be there should be the same ego that speaks to you and say, I may not be really good or the greatest at this part of it, but I'd be damned if I'm not the greatest at what I've already, that got me to the point to get me to the door, right? And to maintain that. And I think if you're someone like a Bradley Beal, who is an excellent basketball player, he's an excellent scorer, I think that you have to acknowledge playing on a team that accentuates what you do best. And sometimes that may mean not having to take the bag for an organization that wants you to be more than what you don't either have a passion for doing or is not in your purview for what your skill set brings. Sometimes you have to talk sense to the organization. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
and stop them from wrecking themselves.
I have to amend an earlier statement, so hopefully people are listening, are still on, because I feel like I've been like way out there with some of the comments here today. But even if you tried to mold this team and made them like the Portland Wizards or something like that too, the
That's
contracts,
a mashup.
but the contracts alone of Beal and Lillard together is nearly $100 million. What are we doing? Like that could never work. That could never work. You have nobody. You have to have me and you out there.
Listen. You know what? The jackpot tonight is supposed to be was the Mega Millions is 177 or something like that.
Well,
even the Mega Millions. You know what I'm saying? You got to work hard to even get that than what these two guys are getting.
Yeah, that could never work. So I want to amend that earlier statement. Like, hey, they should try to find a way to play together, because there's no way that could work from a team building standpoint. $100 million, 2 guys alone, and 2 guys who don't play defense. Yeah, no, thank you.
I tell you what, though, whichever state has to handle that contract. Oh, they getting over on the state tax though. Be rest assured, DC. Portland, I don't think those states are state tax free.
Nah,
you'll be like,
they are not.
I don't know. You guys can stay here, live here. we got some infrastructure projects we need funded.
Wow. Well, that would be
down.
a faux pas in roster building if that were ever to come to light. So I want to amend that. I think I was saying it kind of almost tongue in cheek anyway, but let me really think about it. Like, yeah, there's no way those two guys should ever look to try to play together. No way.
Look at you, man. Taking what little oxygen is left of them boys. Anyway, man, awesome show this week. Really fascinating. It's funny. You would think that as we start climbing up the food chain that we would have even more positive conversations about what the futures are going to be like for some of the teams that we're already, examining and exhuming, right? But I feel like it's getting worse. like
No, I agree. I think if you were to
maybe
take
some of
stock,
these teams don't realize that they are hanging on by a thread, and
well,
it's going to be like,
they're poorly constructed. I think, and they're going to be stuck in this middle ground for a very long time. So, would you rather be the Washington Wizards or Portland Trailblazers right now with Lillard Hall of Famer, Beal fringe, maybe can make the Hall of Fame, whatever, I don't know, or the Houston Rockets or the San Antonio Spurs right now, who are more or less bottomed out with an opportunity to get number 1 and number 2 picks with guys who could potentially change your franchise. And I'd rather be the latter. I'd rather be the Rockets or the Spurs right now than the Wizards or the Blazers, to be very honest with you. And I know that sounds insane, but at least there's a direction, as opposed to just like we're middling and we're kind of held hostages by these two high level all-star, all NBA type guys, but can't do much more than kind of what they've shown here within the last couple seasons.
I would really like to see, when it comes to Beal and to Lillard, and I kind of liken this a little bit to what we saw take place with Charles Barkley, right? There was a transition period where, when Charles Barkley was the man, he had that window of getting to an NBA championship, and he just couldn't get past Michael Jordan, right? Michael Jordan was the roadblock for a lot of great players who we wished were hoisting up an O'Brien trophy, right? But with Damian Lillard and with Bradley Beal, what I hope doesn't happen is, because it doesn't seem like that's their mentality, but what I hope doesn't happen is they don't start jumping on teams that compromises the greatness of what they have been giving us over these years. This may have been the best windows that they've had, right? A few years ago. But it doesn't mean that they can't go somewhere and be a part of something that helps to continue to elevate the greatness of what they've brought to the game. We've seen guys do that, right? We've seen Grant Hill do it. We've seen it a couple of times with Baron Davis, right? So we've seen players who have been able to transition in the twilight of their careers, and I'm not saying it because of age. I'm saying it because of what their skill set means in this modern NBA. Is it outdated, or can it adjust and adapt and adjust? And I'm hoping that that's what we're talking about here, because we're focused so much on how much they're getting paid. And listen, they've earned every single dollar. It is not as if these guys have been bumming it, you know what I'm saying? And just kind of being laissez-faire, and the organizations weren't in a position where they couldn't do it. They had to do it if they wanted to keep these players, right? But in doing that, that was the risk that was taken. If you're Lillard and you're Beal, you have to now understand your risk of the legacy that you're portraying if you're going to continue to play on badly constructed rosters, as we've talked about. And you have to start thinking about, where's your place going to be if this type of play that you're giving isn't helping the team and isn't helping yourself. And I think that that's when you have to start thinking about that transition to going to teams, or figuring out a way to get to teams that can allow you to continue the greatness of what you do. And hopefully the organizations that have those teams know what to do in putting the kind of roster where that allows that to be elevated and not suppressed.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'll just close with this. They've gotten their money. Do they want to win an NBA championship? And I think the answer to that is yes, but they want to win it their way. And, their way doesn't seem to be something that's possible with their current teams and current structures. So do the teams ultimately decide, listen, it's best we just move on, because you're not going to go. So we're going to move you on ourselves. and Washington and Portland will have some very interesting decisions to make, as they do every year. But I think we're going to be in the same place, same bat time, same bat channel next year, saying, "Oh, look what Washington did, look what Portland did," or more. I think more sadly what they didn't do. So,
well said, brother. Well said. That was a really good eulogy. I liked it. That was Shaw M.E. That was a Shaw M.E. eulogy.
I'm trying to become calmer.
You're kind of scaring me there. You had the Dexter thing going on a little bit earlier. I didn't know if you were gonna kill him over twice. But that's how we finished the show. Once again, man, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. Catch up with you